Welcome back to the Her Fertility Podcast. I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Knopman, who is a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist and the director of fertility preservation for CCRM of New York. She is over on the East Coast. I'm here on the West Coast, and we're joining together today to highlight her amazing new book, which will be out at the beginning of next year. So welcome, Dr. Knopman. It's so nice to meet you.
So lovely to meet you. Two things. Where are you on the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles.
My parents grew up in Brooklyn in like the 40s and 50s and were insane Dodgers fans. And then when the Dodgers moved to the West Coast, they stayed Dodgers fans. So they've corrupted all of us. So we had a very, very good weekend. I showed up on Sunday. I was on call this weekend. So I showed up to work wearing full Dodger gear. And in the OR, I made them play I Love LA for like 3 hours straight. And everyone's like, we're done, Jamie. We're done.
Like, we're not done. Yes, it's been a celebration nonstop over here. Tell me, what was the inspiration for writing this book?
So I always loved to write, even as like a young kid. I say in the second grade, I read a book about Elizabeth Blackwell, the first female physician, and I was dead set on being a doctor. But I always really did like to write, and I liked the experience of writing and reading. I went to med school, obviously became a doctor. And then what I started to notice was the world of fertility was shifting. And while my husband says I'm very loud, I was only loud enough in the four walls of my office. And I wanted to take the message, what I was sharing with women and men every day, and sort of expand that. And that's why I wrote the book.
It's so amazing. What's in the book, not only do we need to hear it, but we're ready to hear it, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea of egg freezing becoming something that can give you more agency on this journey rather than what I see a lot of is this feeling of being caught off guard with infertility.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, so tell me more.
No, you hit the nail on the head. I said when I first started doing this, I like to say I grew up in the age of egg freezing because the experimental label was removed in 2012, right? That was the same. I had just graduated from fellowship, so I really was there at the birth of egg freezing. And when I took my first job, I was actually the only female fertility doctor. And they said to me, "Oh, you're 35 and you have ovaries. You can be the director of egg freezing." I was like, okay. So it really was there from the beginning. But yes, women used to come in and it was the last ditch effort. They might have been in their 40s. And that's really why the success rates initially were pretty poor. And egg freezing got a bad rap in the beginning, but it was really because we were freezing the eggs of the wrong patient, unfortunately. But then it moved to be women of younger and younger ages. And that is why we are so much more successful now, because the quality of the eggs is really so much better.
Yeah. It does give you so much more options. If like I think back to myself in college, and if I had anybody telling me like, hey, consider freezing your eggs. This is how easy it is. This is how accessible it is. It's covered through some employers, right? And if somebody had told me that back then, I probably would have done it rather than go through my experience of infertility where, all of that was off the table at that point.
Yeah. I mean, preventative medicine is really where it's at, right? And again, people will debate me all day long, and I own that egg freezing does not work for everyone, right? You can freeze your eggs and they cannot survive the thaw. They cannot make embryos. The embryos cannot turn into healthy, viable pregnancies. But you don't not buy flood insurance if you live in a flood zone. You buy it, right? The insurance may not pay out, but you still have it because you're hoping it will. And that's really what preventative medicine is supposed to do to reduce the chance of something happening. So I think that's what I tell people all the time. I say, listen, it may work, it may not, but you're much better to freeze your eggs in your fertile years than to wait when you're going to be facing infertility.
100%. And to dispel the myth, because I've been asked this question and I understand the thought behind it, but the myth that freezing your eggs will impact your fertility health later on or your AMH levels. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get asked that a lot. So I am, as I've already told you, a sports fiend. So I compare everything in my life to some sort of athletic competition. So when you think about ovaries and follicles, so most women have two ovaries, and within the ovaries are follicles, and the follicles are protecting the eggs. every month, a group of eggs, right, or follicles are racing each other to be the one egg that's ovulated. The ones that don't win the race, they don't get to circle back and run it again, right? They're done. They ran the race, they're done. So when you do egg freezing, we're just getting all the eggs or follicles, the shells that hold the eggs, that were racing each other that month. They were going to die off anyway. So you're not hastening somebody's journey or entrance into menopause. You're just collecting all of the eggs that could have been extracted that month.
Such a great analogy. I love that. And then to clarify for other, because I've gotten this question and I understand where it comes from of this term of freezing, that egg freezing is different from embryo freezing. And you can freeze your eggs and you don't have to freeze embryos. Can you talk more about
Yeah.
that?
And so egg and embryo freezing, if you think about, here we go to the sports again, the first half of the game is exactly the same, right? The same shots, the same blood tests, the same ultrasounds for egg and embryo freezing. Where it changes is once the eggs come out, are they frozen immediately or are they injected with a sperm source, right? Either partner sperm or donor sperm. When you inject sperm, you cannot uninject sperm. So if I make embryos and then I am no longer with my partner down the road, I cannot use those embryos because they were both of our joint property, right? So I always say, people say to me, what's better? Which one do you like better? And I joke around, I say, it's like my two daughters. Some days I like you better and some days I like you better. And what I mean by that is I like eggs for autonomy, right? Reproductive, I call it the reproductive pivot. You can do whatever you want with those eggs. And I like embryos for data because when you freeze an egg, you don't know if it's healthy or has the potential to make a viable pregnancy. But when you freeze an embryo, you know its genetic complement. So you know if it has the right number of chromosomes. So there's just more data.
Do you think we'll get to a point where we can test eggs?
I ended the book saying, what do I wish or what do I hope for the future of fertility? That's number one, right? Because I wish I could say to a woman, hey, you have 20 eggs, and of those 20 eggs, there's 2 viable pregnancies in there, because that's real data that you can work with. But I really don't know. I hope so.
I think we'll get there. I
I
think we'll
mean, if
get
you
there.
think about it, like I always age myself. I am as old. IVF is 1978, right? That's the first baby was born in 78. So it's a fairly young field of medicine. If you think about it, it's only been around for 47 years. And look how far we've come since then. So I bet 47 years from now, I'm not sure if I'll be here, but I bet we'll have a lot of advancements.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot more to do. And I think it's such a beautiful technology that's helping so many people. And there's a real need. So we'll expand it.
I agree.
When somebody realizes or they're diagnosed with, or they decide, I'm finally ready to have a baby, but I have infertility in whatever form that shows up as, right? Because infertility has lots of flavors. Um, and they haven't frozen their eggs, right? They just have less options at that point. So, how does egg freezing benefit someone on their journey?
I think in many ways you serve as your own egg donor, right? So if I present, let's say I froze my eggs at 30 and then I come back at 38 and I'm having some serious infertility related to egg quality and quantity, and I use my frozen eggs, that's me being my own egg donor, right? And I think that's incredible. Now, it's also incredible if you need to use an egg donor that such people exist and that option is available. But if you can use your own eggs, you're probably going to prefer that.
I've never thought of it in that way. And if I freeze my eggs with CCRM, right, in New York, I'm going to freeze and have them there, that I am then geographically bound to New York. But that's not the case, right?
No. So it's a good point you bring up. What is the case is transfer of gametes between fertility clinics is not as seamless as sometimes people think it might be. I work at CCRM where there's 20 plus clinics across the country and in Canada. So for me, it's not usually a problem, right? Because if my patient is in New York and then she moves to Dallas, well, we just send the eggs to Dallas because it's another sister clinic. And many fertility clinics now are in these larger networks. The reason that benefits patients is we have the same lab protocols. So if I freeze eggs in New York, they're going to do the same thing in Dallas when they thaw them as they would do in New York or Toronto or San Francisco. And so that is a nice option for patients. But even if there's not a sister clinic, we ship eggs and embryos all of the time. So it's you're not tied to that specific clinic.
And for those who might be having questions around like, how do I pick my clinic? I'm always like, of course you want to feel comfortable there, but you also want their lab to be top
Yeah.
notch.
I mean, the lab is where it's at in
Yeah.
IVF. I say people can be like, oh, Jamie, you're such a good doctor. I'm like, yes, I've obviously well trained and have done this for a long time, but I'm only as good as the men and women who stand behind me. That's what makes success in a fertility clinic. So that can be hard to decipher, but that's where you got to lean on sites like SART, Fertility IQ. The CDC used to have that. They don't anymore, but
Wonderful suggestions. Now we're focused on women, and I just want to clearly air for anybody who is wondering this that the equivalent for men would be sperm freezing and preservation.
yes. hmm We don't do sperm freezing as much, mostly because I say men have found the fountain of youth from the moment they're born. And I say that as a joke, but not as a joke always. Men are going to make sperm most of their lives. Now, yes, the quality and quantity of their sperm will decline, but it's not in the same way that eggs decline. And therefore, the need to freeze sperm because of aging is less urgent. Now, there are select cases where we do, right? If a man is diagnosed with cancer or may need a specific medication or has to go, is going to war, there are reasons to freeze sperm, but it's not or as frequent as egg freezing.
Yeah, awesome. Who would you want to read this book the most?
That's a good question. I would say it touches on all different age groups, right? I want my teenage daughters to read it. I would want my 20-year-old, med students to read it. I think your 30-year-old self going through infertility or fertility treatment, 40s. And then even as we get older, women, and we may say, oh, we're aged out of it. But what about our daughters or our nieces or people we care about? I do think it hits on every age group. It's really for everyone.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to describe that. I feel like it touches on how we as women are really part of a like a sisterhood or a tribe or a network, right? Where
Yes.
we're experiencing the stages of female life through, we get our period and then we have our fertile years and then we move out of that. And we're always in transition. Like once we get the hang of it, then we transition.
I agree. You're like, wait, I know what to do when I get my period. And then they're like, hello, now you're in menopause. And you're like,
Right.
oh no, I don't know what to do here. But I also do think, community, we're only as, we need to lift each other up, right? We need to share our experiences, form community, collaborate, because that does make every experience a bit less scary.
Yeah, such a beautiful way to say that. Less scary, less unknown. The more you know, the more power you have. And I feel
Completely.
like egg freezing is just giving you more options in your future, regardless of what that looks like.
And you don't like it's, people say to me, I see a lot, like yesterday I saw, I think 7 new patients and all 7 came in to freeze their eggs. And I always say, like, how many kids do you think you want? And more than 50% of the time, patients will be like, 0. I'm like, yeah, okay. And they're like, is that weird? I'm like, no. And you're not alone. A lot of women sit here and say, I don't know if I really want kids, but what I do know is I don't want to not have the chance to have them if I want them. And I basically say, you want to make the decision for your body, not your body making the decision for you. That's really why we tell women to freeze their eggs.
Yes, yes. Like we're gonna shout it from the rooftops. And it takes out this assumption that you do want a family, right? And that is for you. It might be, but it might not be, and that's okay. You then have your
And
option.
that's the thing, like the way we have families, build families has changed so much since, I think about like the 1970s, right? It's long gone are the days of the 2.1 kids, the white picket fence, like how you build your future is whatever you want. But if you don't know what's out there, then you may not have that opportunity.
Yeah, wonderful. If you could shout it from the rooftops, anything else you would want to shout?
I would just say know your body, right? Unfortunately, you may not get taught this in school or someplace, but there are places to get good information, and nobody is telling you there's one right path or one right journey. Your journey is your own journey, but if you have good data, then you can make choices along that way.
The book is available for pre-order.
It is.
And
Yeah.
can you tell
I'm
me
like,
more about how
hold on.
people can find it?
I'm like, wait, I have a copy of it over here. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes and Noble. You can follow me on Instagram. It's just at Dr. Jaime Knopman. And that's where we sort of share tidbits, dispel myths, all of that, and direct you to buy the book.
Wonderful. And I'll link all of that in the show notes. And also give CCRM Fertility a follow. I feel like their
Oh, yeah.
page, you're on there a lot, and they have great information on their page as well.
They do. They do. They are really one of the best when it comes to fertility. I feel very fortunate to be able to work here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am
Very nice.
personally excited for this book and so happy to share it out with everyone. I hope that everyone gives it a read.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Her Fertility Podcast. Check out the show notes below to get your copy of Dr. Knopkin's book, Own Your Fertility, today.